I can take a song and build God's kingdom. Phil Driscoll is a well-known musician, one of those rare performers whose art is possessed by God. Although he is mostly known for his trumpet skills, he is also an accomplished singer, producer, and preacher. We met at the Restoration Church and had an opportunity to chat with him.
There's so many, we're like people. We all make a different sound. But when we begin to sound together, it's really powerful.
I pray for every musician.
Я молюсь за каждого музыканта,
Under the sound of my voice, they attain a new realm in what they do.
для того, чтобы они достигли нового уровня в том, что они делают.
I pray
Я молюсь,
that the sounds that will come out of them
чтобы те звуки, которые они будут издавать,
will be faith-filled sounds.
они были наполненными верой и звуками.
There's one thing you do when you sing.
Потому что одно, когда ты поешь,
Use an example.
вот ты, например,
When you sing,
когда ты поешь,
you are tuned in to your pitch.
ты просто настроен
To the
на
words.
определенную октаву, ты на определенную
Now it's
тональность,
time to be tuned in
слова.
to releasing your faith.
А теперь время для того,
As you
чтобы
sing.
настроиться на то, чтобы высвобождать веру,
If
когда ты
there's
поешь.
anything that changed my life,
Если что-то и
I
изменило
really didn't know
мою
that I
жизнь,
could play and release my faith in the sounds that I make.
я не знал, что я могу играть и
Because then you
высвобождать
begin to
веру в
play
то время,
above your
когда...
natural ability.
И тогда ты начинаешь играть своими
You hear me?
сверхъестественными
You
возможностями.
begin to play above your, you begin to sing above your natural ability.
Вот тогда ты начнешь
And
петь
when
как
you
выше
sing
своих
to
естественных возможностей. Когда ты поешь Богу,
Listen to me.
послушайте меня,
You can release your song, you can release your faith
тогда ты можешь высвобождать свою
when
веру.
you say, highest praises. You're releasing your faith
Ты высвобождаешь
in
свою
God's
веру
ability to perform for you.
и Божью способность
Do you hear me?
исполнять
Now, I
тебе.
just want, what time? Whether you're young or old, if you don't have any fire, life is boring. It doesn't pass the sniff test to look at this and go, well, I'm going to wear a mask. I'm going to close my business. So how do I make money? Well, I have to depend on the government. That's where they're all going. The government wants to replace God. You have a gift. I have a gift. My gift is no better than your gift, nor yours better than mine. Because a gift is something we did not earn. God gave it to us.
Thank you for your performance.
Thank you very much.
I listen to your music online, and it's totally different when you are in your presence. It was very powerful.
Yeah, it's different.
How do you feel about this church? How is it being among this young crowd?
I loved it. You know, the whole thing about it is, whether you're young or old, if you don't have any fire, life is boring. And certainly, if you don't have fire in your heart, in your eyes, in what you do, I don't know if you can ever do anything. That makes sound really funny, but probably the older you get, if you're not really careful, you'll fall prey to being judgmental about someone who has more energy than you do, right? But when it comes to praise or worship or really doing anything, how can you do anything in a world-class way if you're not, what's the right word? If you're not bound by some kind of ceiling, right? Like little airplanes, like 172s, whatever, they can only fly so high because they weren't built to fly high, right? They don't have enough power, they don't have enough thrust, and their airframe won't sustain high altitude because it'd crumble, right? If that makes any sense. Well, everybody was built by God to be a force in our world for Him. That's the whole premise. Jesus died for the world. Okay, so if that's true, if you just are Joe Normal and you won't lift your hands, you won't shout, you won't clap, but you do at a sporting event, or you do where you think it's important. If you're kids, if you're an adult and have children, and they play Little League or they play some kind of sport, you'll be there every time cheering them on, right? That same thing falls true in worship or in getting into God's presence, because if you really love Him, you won't be silent about Him. That's just a general thing. But what I see in the church is people that are liberated, people that have an innocent desire to just be in God's presence, and they're excited. Jesus Himself couldn't minister in places where there was no excitement, expectancy, right? Religion is famous for making you, like you sing a hymn, la 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 la, right, whatever, but you don't expect anything. You do it out of, rote, you just, because that's what you do. But if you can be in a place where there is genuine excitement, excitement breeds excitement. Like if you're a real, stoic person and you get around someone that's not, you'll either leave or you'll get a little more wild or exuberant. Does that make sense? And so when people, even that are not liberated, come into a place like this, and I'm not talking about people that are not born again, I'm talking about people that know Jesus. But it's so easy to succumb to a status quo of this, I'm a Christian, so this is what I do, and I don't do anything else. That's called religion, right? And Jesus had the biggest problem with religious people. I say this, I think it was your pastor, I said, the best people, because he said, I'm called to the lost. I said, that's great, because you show me a guy that's just been a normal hellraiser and he gets saved, he's going to be a lot wilder for God than somebody that's just been there all the time and they haven't experienced God's delivering power because they think they've always been a Christian. That's a dangerous place to be. Yeah.
2020 is a tough year, and because of, not even because of this pandemic, but pandemic made us kind of distant from each other. And there's, and there's like, why? Because we have this underlying fear of death. It kind of made our relationship miserable, so it's affected us in a very deep level. I want to ask you, what was your initial thoughts when it started this year in COVID?
Action was, you've got to be kidding. Because, to me, it's, just think about it. In my life, and obviously in your life, we've never seen the whole world put on masks. Never, right? But fear breeds fear. You speak fear, you make people fearful. So when you look at it, is COVID real? Yes, it is. But the power of God is more real. And it's above, when the word says every knee will bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, that means COVID has a name, and it's under the name of Jesus. His name is above it all. And so I guess the thing, when you look at it, in my opinion, this whole pandemic is an affront against the church. It really is. Because, first of all, you can't touch, you can't agree, right? Because with, you know, even to shake hands is a form of an agreement, right? And then when you think about it, you know, if we become isolated, you become isolated, I become isolated in our world for fear of getting some of the disease or for fear, any reason, then we are literally becoming an island. And islands, for a person to become an island is a very dangerous thing because you get no outside input. You certainly get no encouragement, right? And to be honest with you, when I first ministered overseas, when I first played for Jesus in Russia, I was amazed at how the people that I met, you know, on the street, their heads were down. They did not look at one another. They willfully ignored the fact that you're passing them, right? That's dangerous. And it didn't used to be that way in our country, but more and more do you see it, right? So if you look at COVID and you know that the fact is that COVID has become a pandemic, has taken people's lives. However, many diseases have taken more than COVID. So it's been blowing up, in my opinion. Is it serious? Yes, it is. But the way we're responding to it is to shut everything down. You can't do that because there's something wrong in, let's take the guy that doesn't know anything about God, doesn't have a relationship with God. It doesn't pass the sniff test to look at this and go, well, I'm going to wear a mask. I'm going to close my business. So how do I make money? Well, I have to depend on the government. That's where they're all going. The government wants to replace God. That's where it's all going. And so when you see it with that mindset, you go, wait a minute. This has got to be not just a coincidental disease. It's a planned attack on, I believe, the church to get us to quit worshiping. I mean, in California, I mean, I know here to a degree there's that issue, but to say you can't sing, right, makes me laugh because when I studied the Great Depression, when I studied the Dark Ages, when the Dark Ages happened, one of the telltale rules was you couldn't sing on the street. You could not sing. So when you look at all of this, you know, let's stop people from worshiping. They can go to the bars or the casinos, but not to the church, right? That's ridiculous. And then when you say you can't sing, and I even heard here, but I'm not sure that's right. But in one place you could play instrumentally, but you could not sing. And then one said you couldn't play the trumpet, which I laughed because there's a lot more breath that comes out when you sing than goes through a horn because the breath is only used to vibrate. That's it, right? So that's my response to the COVID. I think it's a planned attack to cause fear, to cause people to be discouraged. If you look at all those signs, God can't be in that, you know? And that's the reason Jesus came, was to keep us out of fear, keep us out of discouragement, keep us from being hopeless.
Do you think that in this time and when
government said to shut down the doors of the churches. What the behavior should be from churches, from their leaders? Do you think they should obey the government, or?
That's a hard question. You know, on one side, Jesus said, "You render to Caesar what's Caesar's," but he was talking about money, taxation. Okay. But let's just take examples in the Bible, right? If Daniel had succumbed to the king who told him, "You can't worship anyone but me," if he had obeyed the king, there would never have been a lion's den. I don't think he would have made the Bible, right? But it's not that he defied the law of the king. He recognized that there was a law that was higher. And so when he stood his ground and was put in the lion's den, the king came the next morning early to see the results. Now, Daniel wasn't mad at the king. He said, "O king, live forever," right? "The God that I serve has delivered me." And so it's a very, what's the right word? It's a balance, right? Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego defied the law, the order of the king. But then when God moved, the king says, "I see someone else in the fire." And he became a believer and made it mandatory for all of his subjects to serve that God and that God only. So where is the line? I don't know where it is, but I do know with respect to the Jewish nation in the Holocaust, they willingly marched to their death. They just went like sheep. And when you think about it, someone has to stand up for righteousness. Someone has to be willing to pay the price. And I know you all, from your heritage, know much about tribulation, more than Americans don't know anything about tribulation. But when you think about it, you know, I ministered at a place in East Berlin, and it really did affect my life because the pastor, his mom and his dad had spent 10 years behind bars together at the same time. And he told me of a man that spent 40 years for preaching the gospel. And so, where is the balance here? That's the question. I know people that have been arrested because they continued, you know. If you live in a state where, you know, you're mandated, it is really, in my opinion, as an American citizen, it is against the law. It's against the Constitution to prohibit people from worship. That's why our nation was founded. But we live in a time when there's a lot of turmoil around that. So what do? We stand our ground. We believe God. We walk in love. We don't do things out of defiance. We do them out of a genuine heart to serve God. That's all I know in response to that.
I know that you are a son of a preacher, so you've learned to play trumpet at the church, right? Correct? Did you feel at that time already connection with God?
Oh, well, sure. I mean, I probably wasn't. It sounds funny because I've never really thought about that. But all I knew was I loved God. I was respectful to my father and mother. That's all I knew. And I played in the church while she played the piano or organ or whatever. But that's where the gift began to be evident, right? So, was I aware of how great the gift was? No, I don't think so. I just played. But I was obedient to practice. My parents never asked me to practice. I practiced because of a genuine desire to be excellent, right? But I wasn't aware that I had any kind of a gift other than I just love to play.
And one of my last questions. For me, you're a brilliant example of a man whose vocation and talent and service to God is all aligned, and you're breathing God in everything you do. But not many people from believers, they can say that they do the same. They have kind of regular jobs, but not all of them serving God. What would be your advice to people like this?
Well, that's a big question. I think the correct answer from God's point of view, I think, would be, there's a verse that says the gifts and callings of God are without repentance. In other words, God doesn't take away your gift just because you blow it or because you're not really using it, right? But what he does is, it's sort of like, that's a challenge to answer. When you know in your heart that you're supposed to do something that you are gifted to do, but for whatever reason you can't yet, you have to know that nobody ever does great things without challenges, right? So maybe the best way to look at it is, Paul said, I became all things to all men for the sake of the gospel. Now, if you're in a job and you know you're called to be somewhere else, right? Then the best thing to do is to be faithful in your job and to believe God to open the door for you to go, but not to lose the vision, because hopelessness is a great vision destroyer, right? So if you know, all of us have to recognize, you have a gift, I have a gift. My gift is no better than your gift, nor yours better than mine, because a gift is something we did not earn. God gave it to us, right? So when you go with that, you can use your gift in any area, but the greatest area of use is if you use it in your calling, right? Like, you might be really charismatic, you might could market, you might can do all kinds of things in that arena, even if you know you're not called to be there. Well, be faithful in that arena and believe God to promote you, because he will, if you're faithful to it.
Very last question. It should be a very short answer. Yeah. If God will give you the power to change one thing in the world, what would you do?
I would change the understanding of people worldwide with respect to sound and the role it plays in the life of every person from God's point of view.
Thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you very much. God bless you.